right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to week 5 of the xAPI Learning Cohort. I'm excited to be here today with Megan Torrance, and I am going to share my slide deck now so that we're all teed up and ready to go. We're glad that you're here. Feel free to join us in chat and introduce yourself by sharing your name and your pronouns, what you prefer to be called, what organization with, and maybe where you're from. As always, we invite you to talk about today's session on social media using the hashtag xAPI Cohort. You can also tag the xAPI Gnome, and our speaker today is Megan Torrance. So Torrance is the way that you would reach her on Twitter. This again is the 5th web session, and as a reminder, this web session is always recorded because Cohort works with your schedule. So if you are not able to catch our web sessions each week, we invite you to catch the recording via our weekly status, our weekly update, and also we share out our weekly recordings on our website and also on Twitter. As of today, we have 553 people registered for the fall 2021 xAPI cohort. And you'll notice that that's a little bit different than the amount of people that are in Slack. So we have well over almost close to 4,000 people in Slack. And that's because we don't just automatically add you to the cohort mailing list every semester. You have to sign up. So if you're here because you got the Slack message, but you haven't been getting the emails each week, that means you haven't yet signed up for the fall 2021 xAPI cohort, and I suggest that you do by going to our website, xapicohort.com. Today, we have Megan Torrance presenting on a learning data and framework, and we are having me behind the mic today as the host. I'm Jess Jackson, and then we also have Jamie, our wonderful producer, who will help you with any tech needs. You often see her in chat checking things out, and she's there to support you if you have any needs there. I want to remind you, just like I said, you could go to our website to sign up for the fall 2021 xAPI cohort. You are never too late for cohort. Again, from that first slide, when I said that cohort works around your schedule, we mean it. We want to make sure that you can hop in and out as easily and freely as you want, and you can join and tell your friends to join cohort. They're never too late. They can always catch the recordings, and our teams are just getting started, and we're excited to hear about your updates today. So as always, I go through a few slides to talk through what the xAPI cohort is. And the reason why I repeat this information each week is because we invite anyone who may have just joined cohort and needs a little bit of contextual information. So please bear with me if you've heard this before, but if you're new to cohort and you're new to our web sessions, this is absolutely for you. So the xAPI Learning Cohort is free, virtual, vendor neutral, 12-week learning by doing project-based team learning experience and community. Emphasis on that community. Each week on Thursdays from 2 to 3, we have our weekly web sessions, which are shared freely, as I said, in our weekly updates and on Twitter and in Slack. And then we also have our project teams, which are meeting and using Slack and using GitHub and working together wherever, whenever to build out their projects, try things, and learn and continue to learn. Each week, you receive a weekly email with updates and the web session recordings. And if you aren't receiving those emails right now, that means you probably haven't signed up. So I urge you and encourage you to join cohort at xapicohort.com. So where we are today, we're going to have our second set of team check-ins. So we had a few teams check in last week and share about where they were, and we're trying to get folks to join them. So we'll have some team updates. And at this point, if you are going to be the person sharing out for your team, please put it in the chat right now, so we know that we need to give you access to to be a speaker later on, and we can keep track of that. And then we also have our learning data framework by Megan Torrance today. So thank you, Megan, for being here. We're excited to learn from you. With that, I'm going to pass over the mic to Megan, and we can get started right now.
All right, it is so much easier to get started when I can find the mute button. Third session today, second different platform, having ourselves a good time. What I would like to do is welcome everybody. And actually, could somebody give me a confirmation that yes, we can actually see slides?
We can see your slides, but they're going. Okay, now we can see them. It's going in and out for me. I'm not sure if that's the same for everyone.
Oh, I wondered if somebody could give me, because they don't look like they're going anywhere for me. Flickering.
Yeah, they're flickering for me as well.
That
Not
is the
right now. They're steady now.
bizarre thing ever. Yes. Yes. Peter Gunther knows how much about a rave I am, right? Fantastic. Well, let's see how this goes. Let me know if this ends up being a difficult situation for anybody. We are also going to be sharing out the slide deck to everybody who's registered for cohort. So if you haven't registered for cohort and you didn't get an email in your box this week about this session, by all means, go ahead and do that so you get the slide deck in case this becomes too difficult to watch. So last session in cohort, those of you who are back from last time, I shared my general desire for an orderly framework, right? A framework in which we have all the things that we think about what we're doing with learning data into one unified space, right? And I don't know whether that's just the instructional designer in me or just how my thinking goes. What I've since learned is that we're building a framework as an industry for this as we go, right? So we're building like the cranes here, right? We're building the framework as we're moving ahead. This session was originally titled, Now What Do I Do With All This Data? Because we spend a lot of time in cohort, right? Really collecting data, figuring out what data to collect, getting our data into a place, getting very excited, reading statement viewers. But there's a point at which we have lots and lots of data, and we need to be able to do something with it and build that, kind of use it, right? Have orderly data and use it. Those of you who don't know me, I don't want to blow by too fast. I'm the CEO and founder at Torrance Learning. I spend a lot of time helping people, mostly instructional designers, with agile and instructional design. I do a lot of professional development as well as learning strategy for our clients. Back in 2015, when I found out that the Advanced Distributed Learning Group, ADL, that shepherds SCORM and xAPI, were going to stop their design cohorts, I thought, oh my gosh, somebody has to continue cohort, because I had been a part of a cohort experience with Matt Cleaver and a few other people who are still hanging around cohorts. And it was such a powerful way to learn. And I wanted to continue sharing that with the community. So in case the history is now so old that it's lost, we've been doing xAPI cohorts since 2015. And so, as Jess said, this community is strong. And funny enough, Jess and I called today our double header. We gave a workshop or a session earlier this morning on with the Open Sesame on cultivating racial equity in the workplace. I also facilitate for eCornell in the Women's Executive Leadership Stack. And what all of this has to do is that all of these learning experiences kick off tons and tons of data, right? Or have the opportunity to kick off tons and tons of data, right? And as an industry, and this is where it gets a little uncomfortable here, folks, right? As an industry, we kind of have a data problem, right? And that's why we're all here, right? So I don't need to continue singing to the choir, right? But we have this thing where either we don't have data, we have data that's locked up in siloed systems and we can't connect it across the platforms, right? Or once we do get data, we have so much data we don't know what to do with it, or we struggle to make meaning out of it. And so the thing here, right, is as an industry, we're trying to figure out what to do with all of this data. And here's the thing, right? 30 years ago, when I was an undergraduate, I was, for a very brief time, advertising and public relations major, right? Advertising, marketing, right, at that time was kind of a dark art. I'm not kidding. In my advertising class in an Ivy League institution, we were looking at examples of airbrushed subliminal messages in the ice cubes in whiskey ads in magazines. Like, this was a dark art. There wasn't data about it, which seems kind of funny and antiquarian, right? Because if you look, right, you look at marketing today, oh my gosh. I know, just in my own work, right? I know when we send an email message, how long it takes for somebody to open it, when they open it, what is the heat map of when people open an email? What do they click on? How long do they stay in there, right? How, over time, what is that experience? Marketing is gigantically data-driven, right? For all the times in which you complain about how things move on the Amazon.com website, right? And buttons are in different places and your menus are in different order and the flow is slightly different. That's because it's a data-driven design process. Design used to be a dark art, right? And a lot of us in L&D are kind of in this dark art space, with the exception of this present company, right? Because we are looking at how do we get better data out of our learning experiences. And as an industry, we have this really, really interesting opportunity to do something really, really cool with this data. So what I want to talk to you about today is to think about, right, what's a framework for how do we think about using data in learning? And I will give you a hint, right? I'll give you a hint. Analytics has something to do with it. And we're going to talk about analytics, absolutely. But analytics is not the only game in town. And when we kind of mush it all into analytics, we lose some of the recognition of the power that we have with this data, right? We're going to talk about some examples that kind of bring that framework to life. And then start talking about some of the systems and processes and foundations that need to be in place in order to have, right, this data-driven, this data framework within an organization, right? So, yeah, right, David. So David said, data's kind of creepy when I try to order cross-training shoes and start getting posts in Instagram, right? And that's because of data, right? It's there, right? So, let's talk about big data, because big data is a very, very fancy term, and what we are doing with xAPI as we get it into scale, it starts to border on big data, but I don't think we're totally there yet, right? So here we go. Big data, it's the field it treats, right? It's how we analyze, extract information, and deal with very large data sets, right? Very large data sets. And it's often where we're talking about things that are more than you can do on your own laptop, right? So if you can download all the data, you can manage it in Excel, it's probably not big data, right? Big data, right, is probably not what we have. And so I want to make sure as you go back into your organizations, you're like, hey, we had a big data talk today. No, right? In L&D, we often have enough data, right? Or I know there's some of us, right, we'll never get enough data, but, right, we have enough data to be leveraging many of the techniques and processes that are and mindset shifts that we think about when we talk about big data, right? So big data, right? Multiple data sources, right? So if we think about David and he wants new running shoes, right? There's multiple data sources that great marketers, right? Great marketing systems are going to have in order to extract all those things and find out that he really does want running shoes, right? And so multiple data sources. So as we're thinking about this in an xAPI framework, right, we're thinking about, right, I have data from learning, and a lot of us are going to start with data from e-learning, but there's data from chatbots, there's data from performance support, there's data from Slack, there's also performance data, right? There's data about what I actually do on the job, right? And so being able to connect those multiple data sources is a big part of that big data definition, right? And we're talking about structured and unstructured data, right? So structured data, think of something that if I ran it out into an Excel spreadsheet would be a rectangle. SCORM is a fantastic example of super structured data, right? There's a limited vocabulary of things I can talk about. I know all the possible pieces of information you can ever give me in SCORM before you even write a course, because it's that limited. xAPI is structured data, but it also, if I were to run that out as a, if I took all the data in an LRS and dumped it out, it'd be kind of like a ragged right? Like a left justified, but that right-hand side of text, just like on this screen here, right? Because some statements are going to be long and some statements are going to be shorter. But xAPI does have structure to it. It's why we have profiles, why we need profiles, right? So that we can get our data back out. Real big data also includes some gloriously unstructured data, right? We talked about big data is more than you can do in Excel. I asked Matt Cleaver a couple of years ago now to please dump me out a data set from our hands-on museum digital exhibit program or project that we did a few years ago. And I think I'm going to get this wrong. It's something like 3 days. I had 12,000 rows of data, right? And it was way more than I could handle and do anything with in Excel, right? David, actually, interestingly, so this was much more than just the most popular exhibit. It's a great example, so I'll pause here. Thank you for asking that question. This was an exhibit or a project in which we used Bluetooth beacons. We put beacons on students who, on their name tags, not on the students themselves, on their name tags, to identify them with a particular class field trip. They would go up to an iPad. The iPad would recognize who they, I'm grabbing my necklace as though this is my beacon, but kind of, right? It would recognize who I am and what classroom I'm in. And the iPad then would greet me. Now, we didn't want to have student names in our data. So we gave each card or each badge had like a, you could be the Brigbound bat or the elm tree or, a certain fish or something. And I would then answer questions, report observations, make inferences with the iPad. It was directing me to interact with an exhibit, right? So out of this then data that I get was who spent how long at what exhibit. So absolutely, I could tell you what exhibits were popular. Interestingly, because we used xAPI and not SCORM, right? I could tell repeat visits to the same exhibit. So we have some reports that show unique visits as well as repeat visits. We tagged each interaction with the school science data standard, right, or curriculum standard, right? So we had really great, talk about structured data, right? We tagged our data back to those curriculum standards. So all sorts of data, questions answered, all sorts of things, right? When we start getting into big data, right? We go beyond math and we start getting into statistics, maybe even AI and ML, right? Machine learning. Most of us in the learning space are not yet in the machine learning space, and that's okay, because you know what? There's a lot that we can do with math, but statistics is where it starts to get interesting, right? The data, right? So this is why, David, when you asked your question, like, oh, I'm following this rabbit hole, right? And if you want more information about this, this project, we've got a case study in Learning Solutions magazine, or you could ask Matt Cleaver, who was the brains behind the technology on this one, right? But it's really fine-grained. I can see data, right, at a lot of detail. It's not like completed. Megan completed the Whisper Dish interaction. Well, it doesn't tell me anything about it, right? So this allows us to do that. Big data and enough data, particularly in an xAPI environment, right, is relational across data sources. What that means is that there are shared identifiers in the data that I connect to other pieces. So in this hands-on museum example, right, my identifiers are first my badges. I'm sure I have a badge. I won't bother to take the time. I got a badge somewhere around here, handfuls of badges at some point, right? Right, but I have that badge ID. That's one, right, index value that I can use to connect. So that badge ID not only visits exhibits, but is in a classroom that visits on a certain date, right? So now I'm connecting things together, right? That's that relational data. Other relational data would be the curriculum specific standards, right? So I have a particular geology standard that is interacted with at different exhibits. Well, now I can run reports based on geology or exhibit. As we build this out, it'll be across multiple sites, right? So all of those can be connected, right? And one of the beautiful things about xAPI, as opposed to SCORM, right? And it's definitely with big data and absolutely in our enough data environment, is that the data is extensible, right? We have the ability to add new data to it and new data sources, right, without breaking the original model, right? Which is why, quite frankly, I'm a gigantic fan of working with your data inside your learning record stores and your analytics platforms there, because they're flexible enough to be able to have those new and varied data specs. Extensible, yes. So there's multiple ways in which we can think about extensible, right? I can add new data sources, or I can continue on adding different content about or context about a similar data source. David, I think ultimately we're all going to need to be brushed up enough on stats in order to be able to really be making some good decisions with our data. I'm not sure you have to do the statistics, right? So it's similar to, right, the one of the number one questions people ask when they get into xAPI is like, do I need to know JavaScript now? No, you don't need to. But to be able to have enough sense about what's going on to be a good consumer and requester of that, absolutely. So I think that's really the same thing. I'm so glad you asked that question. I'm actually working on a book right now on workplace learning analytics, and there is a statistics chapter. It's not going to have formulas. It might have a couple of formulas, right? But it's going to be talking about, like, what does it mean? What does correlation mean? What do these things what are the boundaries of what we can expect from any one statistical piece, right? So I think that is fantastic, and I love your definition, right? I love your definition there. So as we look at building a framework for thinking about our data, right? For thinking about our data, there's a few things here, right? And remember, I promised it's not just all about analytics, right? There's a big piece of our data framework that is all around storing and securing. Okay? And then we get to reporting and visualizing, which is different than analytics. right? And so really I'm parsing things out, perhaps a little bit overly granular, but I can run a report, I can make a visualization that is not then a true learning analytics kind of space. But I can also, without analyzing the data or reporting it or visualizing it, I can use data to improve the learning experience, like as part of the learning experience, right? So I can use analytics and visualizations and all to say, oh, I could make a better decision about how to build that learning experience, or I can actually directly use data in the learning experience and to direct that, as well as to initiate workflows, right? Or to be a part of a workflow. Right? If I were to make nice, neat buckets, as I am prone to do, I might loosely organize these 5 into archive, analyze, and act on. Right? And that's really mostly because I was unsatisfied with how the 5 held together. Like, oh, I need something a little bit more structured, right? Archive, analyze, and act on. Right? When I think about storing and securing data, right, I think about all the processes that we undertake when we warehouse that data. That includes your data privacy and backup. It includes protection, all the GDPR stuff, right, and the legal requirements and the ethical considerations around storing and securing data, and to ensure its protection and its positive use, right? I also feel there's a very important data component here around what is an individual's transcript and experience and validating their credentials, right? So part of storing and securing and creating that that wealth, right, that treasure trove, is being able to provide access when needed and verify what's in there. And these are really deeply important things that I think sometimes when we get like, whoa, analytics, we forget just how valuable these things are. So storing and securing is not to be sneezed at, and quite honestly required for all the rest of the things, right? It's really the first step. Then we get into, right, reporting and visualizing. That's where you get into your dashboards and scorecards. And where's my book? I was recently reading a book. Somebody can get sorry, I'll show these on the screen. So Vance and Parsky have been busy lately, or Peggy Parsky. So there's a book, Learning Analytics, Maddox, Parsky, and Hall, Using Talent Data to Improve Business Solutions, really excellent book. And Measurement Demystified. This is in Measurement Demystified, David Vance and Peggy Parsky. This book really gets into, right, what's the difference between a report, a scorecard, and a dashboard, and the measurement culture around that. So that's some good future reading that, you know what, Jess and Jamie, I could provide links to those that we can email out to everybody who's on the cohort mailing list. We then start looking at, right, I'm going to get into learning analytics in just a bit. Irma, I would absolutely, oh, great, you know what? If somebody else can get the names of those books, that'd be great. I unfortunately can't type and present at the same time, just from my particular computer setup today. Right. When we talk about incorporating data within part of the learning experience, right, we talk about personalizing and recommending. And I really feel like the personalization and recommendation get lumped together. I see those as different, right? Personalization is where I want a particular set of things. I'm setting that up. recommendation then are kind of after that, like, you like this, we like these other things. And there's some really interesting statistical models that help make that possible. But it's really in support of the learning experience itself. And then initiating workflows, right, which I think is really an interesting and exciting space, right, to be in. I want to talk a little bit, though, right, about learning analytics, right? Analytics is often thought of as having 4 kind of primary thrusts or purposes for analytics. And if you're interested in more of this, Ben Betts has a he calls it the Learning Analytics Maturity Model. You can actually assess and benchmark your organization against his model. And it's super, super cool. And thank you everybody for those links in the chat. I appreciate that. When we think about analytics, right, we can think of descriptive analytics or help tell me what has happened. Much of the reporting that we do in L&D tells me what has happened, right? It tells me, and the analytics that we can do with xAPI too, right? What's going on, right? And then diagnostic is, why did this happen, right? What's happened? What's going on here, right? And so those two are very related, but slightly different. Predictive analytics is, all right, based on what has happened, what do I think will happen next? And prescriptive analytics, right, is if I want a particular outcome, what do I need to do to get there? Okay. In my experience, these are absolutely, they kind of settle out into a maturity progression, as Ben Betts suggests, but they're also a series of questions that are interesting to ask, right? I am much more interested in having a rich and varied set of questions, and I want to get to that in a second, than saying, oh, that's predictive versus that's diagnostic, right? I'm not sure that is as meaningful from a day-to-day, right? And then when we get into those descriptive analytics, a lot of what we can do and a lot of what can inform our questions come from some models that we're very familiar with already in terms of learning evaluation, right? A lot of people are familiar with the Katzel-Kirkpatrick model, and so I'm not going to, that's the level 1, 2, 3, and 4. What I find interesting is Wilhelm's learning transfer evaluation model, which really kind of expands on the 4 levels and really starts to inform a number of questions that as I'm embarking on a data and an analytics, right? So we're in that space of analytics. When I'm embarking on an analytics project, one of the first things we say is, right, what do we want to know? What are we curious about? What are our questions? I don't know what data to gather until I know what questions we're trying to answer. Right? And I tend to be in the gather more data than you think you're going to need, because you never know what questions you're going to have, but you got to start somewhere with questions, right? And this model provides a really, really useful framework to help guide a team through what are all of our questions that we might be doing. So this is a nice look at just how all the 2 models stack up with each other. I will tell you, this is my own stacking of the 2 models together. I have not gotten the Kirkpatricks or Wilhelmer into a room together and said, hey, how do y'all stack them up together? This is just my quick take a look at this, right? Okay, so we've got our framework, right? We've got our framework, and we have a sense for some of the evaluation frameworks, which quite frankly are a lot of the first places that we're going to go. Let's talk about some examples. right? And we have in last year's xAPI party, we had a presentation from Andrew Corbett, who's at University of California, Davis. Really interesting project, right? It's solidly in that learning analytics space, with a lot of descriptive and diagnostic notes to it, right? So what he was able to do is within a learning experience, right? He built it all in Captivate, right? He was able to group and segment learners using statistics. He was able to segment learners based on performance and see that the average, right? A lot of times we're kind of like, oh, how many people get this question correct? And we average all the answers together. What's the average score in this test? Average all the questions together, right? And what he was able to show, because he had the data, is he separated it out into segments and found that the averages weren't interesting. What was really interesting were how the segments performed, right? So much so, and I didn't go quite so far as to put predictive on here or prescriptive, right? But he was able to show that learners who performed well on one part tended to perform well on other parts, and learners who didn't perform as well tended to not perform as well consistently in other parts. And when you know that, because you have the data, you can then think about it from a learning designer's perspective, right? Think about how you would tune that learning experience to account for the fact that you have some high performers who are actually probably just coasting through. You know, some people who are really struggling, and your average experience is not, right, hitting it for either of them, right? Really powerful stuff. Another one, a group at a university in upstate New York were creating professional development for executives, and what they were doing was taking really, really finely grained data out of Articulate storyline experiences, right? And using that to inform the design of down to the screen level. No kidding. They had examples, right, where the design of the feedback screen after you answered a question incorrectly, right? They could see, for example, that one design was 28% more effective in tuning future performance than another design. Really, really granular level of data. Right. And that's just super exciting stuff that we can be getting this kind of information from an analytics perspective, right? Using, in both cases, they were using xAPI, right? Things you could not possibly have done in a SCORM environment. One of our clients is building a really interesting set of learning experiences where we have micro-learning videos, we have chatbots, we have post-course reinforcement. That's actually what the chatbot is serving up, right? And we are making an iterative process, right? And a personalized process, right? Whereby as individuals are proceeding through a learning experience, right? We can, our goal is to start predicting performance on an individual level, but certainly personalize that because we're incorporating that data back into the learning experience. What did you do over here? Oh, you did this over here? Then we're going to give you this piece of information, this piece of reinforcement in this other format, right? This is an evolving project. We've gotten our first two pilot runs through. And xAPI is not in this pilot run. It'll be a future run or a future iteration. But the ability, right? So we also talked about enough data environments, right? Big data environments to have data from multiple sources. We've got in this experience, we've got SMS chatbots. We have microlearning that is served up from a Cornerstone LMS. And there's some activity, I can't remember, some activity happening in Microsoft Teams too. But I believe that's mostly their social with their coach. Okay. When we get out to the world of activating or acting on data, right, and initiating it in workflows. One of great examples. It's an oldie but a goodie, right? It is a medical device and an equipment space. It's not this equipment, but this is just a stock image, right? But what they were able to do was get training and competency information from an LMS, right? As well as, right, and express that in xAPI, as well as get actual activity data from technicians being sent out into the field to work on equipment, right? So when the schedulers then were selecting people, right, as part of their workflow to go out to service a piece of equipment, they had data that indicate, right, who's been trained on something, who's experienced on something, who has to go, right, which ones needed to go back out and be redone after one technician worked on it, right? Maybe it wasn't a great fix the first time, right? And all of a sudden, we're now using this combination of learning and performance data to be able to drive business results. And that was just super, super exciting stuff, right? So it's very easy to get all whipped up in the data. I want to make sure we leave time for team updates here, right? But all of this requires a series of foundational perspectives, right? And environment, right? Things in your data-driven culture to be able to do this, right? So if what I want to do is start using data in some of these ways, right? It's not enough to just have the data. It's not enough to have, be sending xAPI data and have an LRS plug it in and like, woohoo, right? There's a process by which you align goals and figure out which projects we're going to start on first, because you can't start on all of them. How do you refine that implementation plan, right? We were talking earlier, right? Do we need to be learning statistics? Somebody needs to know statistics, right? Do you need to be a data scientist? No, but at some point, somebody will need to be, right? You often bring the business acumen and the learning evaluation perspective. And I honestly am a big believer in instructional designers being some of the people who are really great, right? That visual communication of data, right? How do we set in place the systems and data supply, including some things that otherwise might seem really boring, but are essential to all of this, right? Data cleaning and data governance and whatnot, right? How do I maintain the integrity of my data, right? Because if my data isn't solid, then the rest of this isn't very useful, right? Lots and lots of really fun things that we can do with statistics and data science. And we'll have to cover those on a different day. But I also, as much as I can get all whipped up about data and a little bit of math and great case studies, what I'm also finding is that people who are successful in this in their organizations build a coalition, right? They have relationships. In the early days of this, when a team would come to us and it's like, okay, so we've got the learning team, we've got the data team, we've got the HR people, great, right? Or we've got the business people, and we've got the IT people, and we've got the learning team, great, right? What they're seeing is that it's not just an L&D thing going their own. We need to get some of those relationships and that support. So if you, I won't make you name names, if you were one of those people who ever said, if we involve IT, it'll never get done. Okay? A, you're not alone, because I've heard that a lot. But B, we got to involve IT now, right? So it's a new world. If we want to do more and cooler things, then we need to be bringing in our friends from IT and other sources around the organization, and they can show us a lot. So there has been some great questions and conversations here. Go ahead, add your questions right in the chat. It doesn't have to be in the Q&A panel. Jess, I'm going to turn it back over to you and let you take it away with team updates.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Megan. I love the 5 points you made. I love your visuals. I love your new framework. I love to see its development from last session. So thank you. And to answer your question in chat, Chetan, please correct me if I'm saying your name incorrectly. We've taken the Q&A and just go ahead and put it directly in chat, and that's how we'll get the questions queued up to our speakers moving forward. This also gives a chance for all the folks who are a part of cohort to be able to engage and support, which is the beauty of having such a diversely talented community here. So go ahead, if you have questions, put them in chat. I know Megan will be able to respond now. I'm going to pull back up my PowerPoint, and then we'll get into some team updates. All right. So we're going to hop into where your team should be now. We are officially in week 5, which puts us right in the middle of that digging into details and scoping, assigning, and iterating, which means that your team should be working on forming, right? Like you should be formed. You should have a Slack channel. I see a few of us are in GitHub and on our website. If you need support getting your team up into GitHub so that your status updates are together, feel free to reach out to me, Matt Cleaver, Jamie, anyone in Slack, and we can get you up and running there. So we're going to hop right into some team updates using GitHub. I'm going to stop sharing this tab of my screen, and I'm going to share my screen with the team updates. And here we are. Can you all see my screen here with our updates? Thank you for those reactions. So I know that we had, what we're going to do is, if you're here to speak on behalf of your team, can you please raise your hand so that we can give you mic access to speak out? I know that we had Lorna, and please correct me on how to say your name, Ilona, for Team Storyline Beginner. I'm going to have you come to stage, and please tell me how to say your name so I can say it correctly.
Yeah, no worries. It's Ilona.
Ilona.
Yes. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, no worries. And people do get it. It looks like 2 L's, so it's fine. So we're doing really baby steps. So our goal for this week was to find an LRS and set up an account. Most of our team members have done that. And our other goal was to choose their own storyline project that they will be experimenting on. And most teams members have chosen their own storyline projects. Areas where the team needs support, well, we really beginners. Maybe there are more experienced people in our group, but so we kind of really, the questions in Slack channel is very, very basic questions, file formats, and thank you, Matthew and Jason, for answering them. And, I was wondering if anybody feels like want to help beginners, then you just join our channel. We'll be asking questions, so feel free to answer to our questions. What we hope to accomplish next week, we've been watching the tutorials, how to do the xAPI, and the coding tutorials and everything. And so now it's kind of now that we've kind of been a little bit exploring that, then now we want to start doing and start experimenting, and keep asking questions and share stuff on Slack. So that's about it.
Awesome. Thank you, Ilona. I see Martin and Brian have your hands raised. Martin, why don't you go ahead? I see you're on stage.
Okay, can you hear now?
Yep, we can hear you just fine. Martin, did you have your team in GitHub yet?
Yeah, mine's in GitHub. It's what's it? I did. Was there? Oh, Team CMI5 create AU.
Okay, I'm not seeing it yet, but we'll make sure that that gets we'll make sure that that's
Yeah.
listed on our page. So why don't you go ahead and give us an update?
Okay. First, we're not at the stage that you indicated, and I don't know who we is. So I've proposed this as a project. A couple of people have joined. We had a couple messages within the cohort, but need to figure out how to, or just need to. Well, I'm just putting a call out right now. Anyone interested in CMI5? And by CMI5, it's like how they package those courses. There's a new project that's just started, or they've just announced they have testing, and like they've set up projects to allow people to test their products, which make CMI5 packages against a player that they've got, like a test player. They also have sample packages. So the idea was, let's see if we can make something that can create a CMI5 package. And the whole purpose is just learning how the ins and outs, how the bits fit together and things like that. So just like a really below minimally viable product kind of thing is all the idea is. I just added a link to the video where they launched this, and it has a really good explanation. So even if you're just interested in what is CMI5 and how does it fit into xAPI and all of that, it's really quite a good webinar that they had a couple weeks ago, and the video just came live. I just noticed it today, so I stuck that in there. So if you're interested in this, then we can join and maybe set up a meeting. So haven't had a meeting yet. I've just got Matt to point me in the direction of setting up a page or a GitHub page. So that's about where it's at. It's not really going forward yet, but just looking for people to join. And doesn't have to be people really technical. Like part of it is the learning designers. What do you want to do? Like what kind of thing would you like to make, which you maybe would make in Storyline or something else, but think, I can't quite make that because Storyline doesn't do this. Well, maybe we could make something that does that and make it into a package and play it in the player. So that's sort of the goal. But how far, as Megan says, doesn't matter if it's successful or not. So it's just the point is to learn how this works, and we might plug at it and poke at it, and that's all as far as we get. But that's sort of what the goal is.
Awesome. That sounds exciting. And I know you put out your call for people to join you. I've seen you work on several projects over various cohorts. And so that I'm excited for you to be taking that on. That's very cool.
Okay, thank you.
So, all right. I wonder, Jess, if you are out there, it looks like maybe you might be having internet connection issues.
Yes, I am.
Who's next? Who's next? And help promote some people in case we lose Jess. There we go. It's Brian.
Yep, Brian is there. And I am pulling back. Okay.
There we go, Brian. What you got shaking here?
I'm talking to the wrong camera, but here we go. So I've put a survey out into the main, and one of the primary areas of interest was xAPI profiles. So we've started a group for xAPI profiles, really are kicking it off today. The idea with a profile is if you're just starting with this and you're trying to figure out what statement should look like and which terms you should be capturing, a profile is a good place to start. And the idea for the group, my idea for the group, is that we come together and sort of build a primer, get people started with profiles. So the update shows we've set up a Slack channel. We've established the team on GitHub. We've also established the discussion area on GitHub, as well as the GitHub repository where we could put code and references. And then the last item on there is we built a URL for when2meet.com. And this is a calendaring type tool that it doesn't show you what my schedule is. It lets you tell me when you're available. So the idea is it shows on one side, it shows your calendar, and on the other side, it shows the rest of the team. So you can sort of identify what times in the week you're available and see where the trends are for the whole team as you're doing that. And that lets us build some consensus on what would be good times to meet. The other thing to note about this project is I'm trying to coordinate a bit with Team Down Under in Australia. So one of the things I'm doing is putting some times on there late Thursday, late Friday for us. That would be noontime Friday or noontime Saturday for them, with the idea being making it convenient to sort of cross-pollinate a bit. So we might actually wind up having 2 meetings a week if that holds up to do that coordination. So that's really it for where we're at right now. We're looking for other people to join us. If you have questions, join in on the Slack, or you can go ahead and put them in the chat now. If you're unable to go on Slack, that's a good way to let us know. That's really it for our team xAPI profile. Thanks, Jess. Thanks, Megan.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Megan and Brian. All righty. I think that those are all the folks who had updates for this week. Again, your team should have a team GitHub at this point in cohort. If you need support getting your GitHub up and running, please let us know in Slack and we can support you and get you. Uh-oh, you can't hear me? You can hear me? Megan, can you?
I can hear you.
Oh, okay.
Keep
Someone
going.
said in chat that they can't hear me. And we'll get you up and running for that to support you in doing that. I'm going to wrap up this week with some nice things to know. And it is loading. There it is. Our nice things to know are that we are here every week at 2 p.m. on AirMeet. Next week, we have How to Bridge the SCORM and xAPI Divide with CMI5 with Chris Tompkins and George Vilches. And then December 10th, we have our xAPI party online, and you can learn more at xAPI cohort/xAPI party, and you can register as well. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to email xAPIcohort@torrancelearning.com or send me a message in Slack and we'll get you supported and responded. With that, have a great Thursday, and we hope you have a great weekend as well. Thank you, Megan, for your presentation, and thank you all for being here.